So one of the challenges to playing blues and to keeping it interesting, particularly in a familiar key like E, playing over the standard 12-bar blues chord progression, is how to add more chords to the chord progression. And not only that, but knowing why those chords are working. Because you might learn a bunch of different chord shapes or chord voicings, but not really know when you're supposed to use them. Or maybe you learn one particular way through the chord progression, but if you don't understand why those new chords are there, then you can't take those ideas and use them somewhere else. So in this lesson, we're going to look at the idea of chord substitutions, which is the idea of adding chords into the framework that already exists. So adding new chord shapes and ideas into the basic skeleton of the 1, 4, and 5 chords of the blues. And also look at why those chord substitutions work. Now, if you're a blues guitar player and you're interested in learning more tunes for your repertoire, how to turn those tunes into complete songs, and even how to start improvising on those songs, I recommend you check out my membership, the Fingerstyle 5, which you can learn more about at the link below or the link on screen. We're going to look at 3 different kinds of chord substitutions in this lesson, and I'll be showing you these chord substitutions using a set of chord shapes known as the Freddie Green chord voicings. Now, the word voicing is just another word for the way that the notes in the chord are rearranged, or the chord shape. So this and this and this are all E chords, but they are voiced differently, meaning the voices or the different notes of the chord are arranged differently. In this chord voicing, we have the root on the bottom. In this one, we have the 3rd on the bottom. In this one, we have the 5th on the bottom. So we're just going to use a few of these different chord shapes to demonstrate and work through these chord substitutions, but they also make great chord shapes for playing fingerstyle blues. Freddie Green used these to play big band music. He was the guitar player in the Count Basie band for like 50 years, and he would play these as these 4-to-the-bar strummed chord voicings, but we're going to use them played in open position when we can and up the neck when we need to, using the thumb for the 6th string, the index finger for the 4th string, and the middle finger for the 3rd string. So we're going to have 3 different chord shapes that we use for E. We're going to use this one here with the root, the flat 7, and the 3rd. Again, everything is on the 6th, 4th, and 3rd string. So here's the root, the flat 7, and the 3rd. And then we can go up here and have the 3rd in the bass, and then the root, and then the 5th. So this is an E major chord with the 3rd in the bass, or G sharp. So it's often called an E over G sharp, and it's written with one of those slashes, like E slash, can't remember which way the slash would go, and then over G sharp. So the slash means over. So it's an E chord over G sharp, meaning it's got a G sharp in the bass. And then here we can have the 5th, the 3rd, and the flat 7, or an E7 over B, because here's the B in the bass. So these all mean E7. And we can then move those shapes around. We could play A7 here. This is like taking this chord voicing and moving it up. And since we're playing fingerstyle guitar, we don't have to play the bass on the 6th string. In this case, we could use the open A for the root and have the root and the flat 7 and the 3rd. And so if we're here for A, or here, we can then go up here, and this is like taking this E over G sharp chord and sliding it up. Now it's an A over C sharp. Here's the 3rd and the root and the 5th of the A chord. So here's 2 different A chords. And we're not going to use it up here today, but you could go up here and have an A with an E in the bass, the 5th, the 3rd, and the flat 7 of A. But we're just going to use these 2 today. And then for the 5 chord for B7, we could use this shape, and that's just the one we used here for E with the B in the bass. Now it's a B7 chord. It looks a lot like an open B7 shape like this, but just now we've got the 5th in the bass down here, an F sharp, and the 3rd and the flat 7 of the B. And one other, it's not a new shape, but it's another use for a shape, is we're going to use the same shape that we used for B7 over F sharp and E7 over B. We're going to use it here to form a A sharp diminished chord. And down here to form either a G diminished chord, or we're going to have some other names for it along the way to kind of explain what it means. But there's our E stuff, here's our A stuff, here's our B7, and then here are our diminished shapes that we're going to use. So those are the shapes, that's how we're going to play them. And now let's check out how we're going to use those shapes to play these three different kinds of chord substitutions and why they work. So the first kind of chord substitutions we're going to look at are diatonic chord substitutions, meaning swapping in different chords that are already in the key. So to make things even simpler, we'll stick to just adding in the 4 and the 5 chord, because it's really normal in the blues to go from 1 to 5 to 1. That sounds really natural. So we could go, if we wanted to connect up, say, this E7 chord and this E over G sharp, we could go from E to B7 over F sharp and then back to E. And so now we've added in this B7 chord. Say we're playing the first measure of the blues, well, it's supposed to be just a bar of E, but we can have one beat of E, one beat of B7, and then 2 beats of E over G sharp. And then when we get to the 4 chord in the second measure, we can do the same kind of thing. Here we're going from A to E, and then back to A again. Now there's a couple of different ways you could look at it. You could say, well, this is going from 4 to 1 to 4. Or you could think of it as, well, we're sort of temporarily calling A the home chord, the 1 chord, and we're basically just doing the same thing. We're playing the 1 and 5 and 1 of A. It doesn't matter which way you think about it, because it sounds good whether you think about it the first way or the second way. But so now we can have and then from here we could come back and we could play this E7 chord again. And then we could go to A and then back to E, and then to B, and then to E, and then to E over G sharp. So here we're going 1 for 2 beats, and then 4 for 2 beats, and then a beat each of 1, 5, 1, 1. And then we get to the next line. We get to measure 5 with the 4 chord. So here we've got all this motion when we're really just playing 1 and 4, right? We're really just playing the first 4 bars of the blues, which is just E and A. So that's really cool. The second kind of chord substitutions we can do involve diminished chords. And we're going to use this same shape that we used for some 7th chords, for E7 over B and B7 over F sharp. We're going to use the same shape to be an A sharp diminished chord and then a G diminished chord down here. So the thing about this shape is that if we were playing this E7 over B, and we were going to play 4 notes instead of 3, the 4th note would be here. It would be this E note. So here's the 5th and the 3rd and the flat 7 and the root. But if we were going to use this chord shape as an A sharp diminished chord, the final note, the 4th note of the chord, would still be this E, and we would play it like this with a little bar across the 5th fret and get this note and this note and this note and this note. And I'm going to say this really carefully because I often have a hard time getting it straight, but this would be the root and the double flat 7 or diminished 7th of the chord, the flat 3rd, and here's where I get screwed up, the diminished 5th or the flat 5th. those are the 4 notes of that A sharp diminished chord. But these notes function as what's called a common tone diminished chord, which means that it has a note in common with the chord you're on your way to, which in this case is E7 over B. So you can hear that all of this is trying to go like this while this one note stays in common on top. So that wants to happen, and then that wants to happen, and even this wants to happen. Arguably, this note wants to go down so that you get this. But on the guitar, it's the simple mnemonic, like the way to remember what's going on is to think, oh, these 3 notes all want to slide up by half step to get to where we're going, to resolve. So what all that means is if you're on an A chord and you go to A sharp diminished, it will then resolve up by half step to E. So if you're going along and playing, let's say you're on the second line of the blues and you start off playing A, and maybe you go to E7, and then back to A7, and then A sharp diminished, and then there you are. You've gotten to your E chord. So if we play from the beginning of the form, from the first bar, and we can even use that as a quick way to get from A back to E, going from bar 2 to bar 3, right? So that works too. So that's one way to do diminished. And then if we kept going, let's say we were doing the second line, so A to E, and then A to A sharp diminished, and now we're on an E, so let's work our way back down from E through an A back to E, and now we're about to get to the 5 chord, and we play this, which is looks like another diminished shape. What's it doing? In this case, we're on our way to B7. Now the sort of the guitaristic way to look at it is, oh yeah, we're just kind of like gonna go here by half step, which is true, but why does it work? This is not working as a common tone diminished chord. This is working as a substitution for the 5 chord of B7. So what I mean by that is if B was the 1 chord, what would its 5 chord be? What's the 5 chord in the key of B? It's F sharp. So F sharp 7 is the 5 of B7. So F sharp 7 would take you to B7. But in this case, we're playing this. And this is working in this case as if you said, okay, I have this F sharp 7 chord, but I'm going to put its flat 9 in the bass. So if I had just a F sharp 7 chord like this, and I wanted flat 9 on top, I'd add this note here, which is another way of what's called altering a chord, changing one of the notes that would naturally be in the chord, which is the 9, and making it a flat 9. But that altered note is a way of making a diminished chord sort of extra diminished with extra tension. And so it resolves like that. But in this case, we're going to put the flat 9 in the bass. We end up with this diminished shape, working as a kind of 5 of the chord we're going to. And so what all that means is in the second line, when we're coming down, here's measure 7, passing through an A7 to get back to E, and then in measure 8, in the second 2 beats of measure 8, this is taking us to B7. Now we might delay that approach to B7 by playing F sharp minor and then getting to B7, but we can still use this diminished shape to get the sound of this altered 5 of the 5 chord to get there. The third kind of chord substitution we can use, we've already seen a couple of examples of so far, and that's the secondary dominant. And a secondary dominant is basically a 5 chord that you've borrowed to be the 5 of a chord that you're on at the time. So when we're going from A7 through E7 to get back to A, we're basically, it's kind of confusing because in blues, E7 is already in the key, but in strict classical harmony, E7 is not in the key of E major. So in this sense, we're borrowing E7. We're saying, okay, if we're on A, and A is the 1 chord, what's the 5 of A? Oh, it's E7. So we're gonna borrow that and then come back. So going 1, 5, 1 of A. And then we saw briefly the idea of, well, if we're on our way to B7, what's the 5 of B7? Well, it's F sharp 7. So we can have F sharp 7 take you to B7 and take you back to E. But there are other places we can do it as well. So if we start on the turnaround, so the last line of the blues, so starting in measure 9, let's say we actually played F sharp minor 7 to B7, because F sharp minor is actually in the key of E, and it's a really common move, not so much in blues, or certainly not in like Delta blues or anything like that, or even Chicago blues, but in swing and jazz versions of the blues, you hear the F sharp minor, the 2 chord, all the time. When you get to the beginning of the 3rd line of the blues, you might hear 2 beats of F sharp to 2 beats of B7. You might hear it twice. Like, so instead of playing 5 to 4, you might hear 2, F sharp minor, to 5, and then 2 again, and then 5 again. So we could start off thinking about that using F sharp minor here with the root and the flat 7, the flat 3rd, to B7. And then we could swap in the 5 of B7, so F sharp 7. So and if we're going to do that, we can then add one more secondary dominant, and this is one of my favorite moves, and in my mind I think of these as the Ray Bryant changes, because I first heard them played by the great jazz pianist Ray Bryant, who did a lot of solo piano and played a lot of blues as well as jazz, and this is a turnaround he liked to use. So going from the 2 to the 5, and then a quick 5 of F sharp, so C sharp 7. And now, just to make this a little clearer, I am putting the root of C sharp 7 in the bass, so over here on the 5th string. And so it's 2 beats of F sharp, a beat of B7, and then a quick beat of C sharp 7, and then 2 beats of F sharp 7, 2 beats of B7, and we're back around. Now, when we get to here, we can actually use secondary dominants to create a whole turnaround to go from 1 to C sharp, which is the 5 of F sharp, which is the 5 of B7, which takes us back as the 5 of E to the 1 chord. So that whole last line could sound like this. So if we put together all 3 of the kinds of chord substitutions we've done so far, the diatonic chord substitutions, the diminished chord substitutions, and these secondary dominants, we get a full chorus of blues that could sound like this. So I always find that it's really helpful to have a specific way to play through a new set of chord changes, just so I have this kind of mnemonic device, this way that I can play through them and see them in action. But hopefully this breakdown will help you understand why we're doing the things that we're doing, and being able to categorize the chord substitutions as being either diatonic, diminished, or secondary dominant covers a lot of the ground involved in doing chord substitutions on the blues. So hopefully having these voicings and having these three categories to kind of slot the moves into will help you remember how to use them, and also help you recognize them when you see other people use them and play with them when you're watching and listening. So if you've got a question or a comment about this lesson, leave it down below. I would love to hear from you. Again, if you're a guitarist interested in learning more tunes, turning those tunes into complete songs, and starting to improvise on those songs, I encourage you to check out my membership, the Fingerstyle 5, at the link below or the link on screen. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.